Hey man, what's up? What's our topic again for today?
So I'm calling it 50 Shades of Monster.
Oh, I get it. After those soft S&M adult kind of things.
Well, kinda, but it's not adult.
I guess you could say we're bound to enjoy it.
Good one, El Capitan. It's nice to have a brand spanking new topic this week.
Touche, young Skywalker.
Hey, can you guys grow up long enough to do this show?
Yes, man.
Yes.
Adios.
Boy, she sure whipped us into shape.
Callie has left the chat.
Hello and welcome to MonsterKid Fury. I'm Callie. Joining me is Rich from MonsterKid Central. Hi, Rich.
Howdy.
And Rick from Film Fury. Hi, baby.
Hello once more.
In this episode, we are going to talk about 50 Shades of Monster movies. But first,
A little bit of news from over the weekend. Alien Romulus opened. Did you get to see it, Rich?
I have not. I think next week
Gotcha.
with my grandson.
Yeah, we went to see it yesterday, and for the most part, I got out of it what I thought I was going to end up getting out of it, which is a really good first and second act for the most part, and the third act goes off the rails. So
All right.
it,
So without giving too much away, is it what we thought it was going to be, like the teenagers borrow the car kind of thing?
surprisingly, that turned out to be one of my favorite parts of the film
Okay.
because it actually introduces a group of young people who are employees of Wayland Yutani, and it just deals with their lives, which is actually quite interesting.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
that
Oh,
surprised me.
great.
Yeah.
Great.
The one thing I can say is I wish they would subtract Ridley Scott from the entire process of making any Alien films from here on out. I don't understand the obsession with him. They act as if he was like the sole creator of the entire mythology of
Yeah.
Alien, and I just don't get it. I was doing research yesterday, and it turns out Fox actually wanted him back for Alien 3, and were really forcing Walter Hill and David Giler, the producers, to bring him back. But he was
Hmm.
too busy on other projects, in my opinion, thankfully. So, um, ended up
Gonna,
making $108 million over the weekend, which is wild.
wow.
Not fully a success at that point, though, because it's an $80 million movie. So you've got to make 2 to 3 times that
Yes.
between
But it's a good
advertising.
start.
Yeah, it's a good start. And hopefully, maybe they'll just give Fede Alvarez the keys to the kingdom and cut Scott out entirely. We'll see.
Hmm. Well,
But
if you guys are out there are looking for the true starting point for Alien, it's the Terror from Beyond Space.
absolutely, that was the
And
main inspiration that Dan O'Bannon mentioned in numerous
yeah,
interviews over the years before he passed.
yeah.
And
So
he never ran from that, which I appreciate.
I do too. You give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. But
You know,
if
there's nothing. I'm sorry.
I
There's nothing wrong with seeing a movie and saying, I don't know. I think they needed to put this in, so that's why I created such and such, because I thought that the first one was just a monster movie and I needed it to be a character driven movie. So that's why I did that. And just, you know, that's perfect good example of
well, we've talked before, everything's been
yeah,
done. Everyone
sure.
steals from someone else.
Yes,
John
absolutely.
Carpenter had a wonderful quote about that in a documentary that was actually on synthesizer music, but he talked about how being creative, you're going to be inspired and take in everything that you've learned and loved, and you come out and you create something new. It's inherent in the art of creation, really.
Right.
So for anyone to act like, oh, this is the most original idea, it's like, no, it's not. It's very much like James Wan when he directed *Malignant*. He did these interviews where he talked about the film was going to be so original, and it's like, no, you basically took a Frank Henenlotter movie and mixed it with 4 other grindhouse flicks is all you did. I would have
Right.
much more appreciated him saying something to the effect of, "This is my love letter to these movies, everything from Basket Case to Brain Damage, and even martial arts
Right.
films at one point." I would have preferred him to do that instead of acting like he was just coming up with something revolutionary.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do recommend Alien Romulus. It's still fun. It's still entertaining. I know I've read a lot of reviews from people on Facebook and online. They had no problem with the third act. And, at the end of the day, as long as everyone enjoyed it, at least you get something out of it.
Yeah, considering you and I thought that was not going to be the case.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be another Prometheus or Alien Covenant, which this definitely does not fall into that realm.
All right.
At least quality wise. I'll
Right.
put it that way.
All right, cool. I'm glad to hear that. It gives me
So,
hope.
all right. Well, my first choice is the 2016 movie The Monster. This is directed by Brian Bertino, who also helmed The Strangers and The Dark and the Wicked, which I also recommend quite highly. The Monster is an interesting film because it plays out not only as a monster movie, but as a dramatic film, which I find very interesting. The story deals with a mother and daughter, Kathy and Lizzie, who have a very strained relationship. And as we're introduced to them, the daughter, who's 13, has decided she no longer wants to live with her mother. Her mother is an alcoholic, and she's really trying to get her life back on track. She's trying her best that she can under the circumstances to be the best mother she can, and she's failing miserably at it. So you get the idea she has just decided to give in and say, all right, you can live with your father. And you get the idea the mother is doing everything possible to not take this trip. They end up on the road, and we have a series of flashbacks where you see why this relationship is so strained. There's a situation where Lizzie doesn't want her mother even going to her school play because they're not getting along, and it's a rough situation.
Yeah.
On the way, they hit something in the road. They spin out of control. The vehicle's wrecked, and in the road they see a dead animal. They get out. They go to look at it, and they see that the animal, which is a wolf, has been shredded, torn apart, and inside of it they find a claw about this big. They get in the vehicle. The daughter is very concerned and worried. The mother keeps just trying to console her as best as she can. It was attacked by another animal, that type of thing.
Hmm.
They're able to, via cell phone, call for both for a pickup and an ambulance to show up. And at one point in time, the daughter suddenly notices that the wolf is gone. The tow truck driver arrives, and that's actually played by the gentleman who played Boomer's husband on the Battlestar Galactica reboot. So it's kind of neat to see him because he's got this crazy burly beard going on and everything.
Right.
He proceeds to go ahead and start trying to get the vehicle running, at least to get it hitched to the tow truck and get them out of there. During that time, the daughter decides she's going to leave the vehicle to get the cell phone to call the father for an update, because when the tow truck driver shows up, they put everything in his vehicle with anticipation of riding into town with him. So she gets out of the vehicle, she looks to the left of the road and sees the wolf kind of at the edge of the wood line and the road. And she goes forward, gets closer to it, and there's a brilliant shot where you see the monster behind her, and everything just kind of unfolds from there. I think it's just a really interesting framework of the film, the way they take the present moment that they're in and you flash back to show the decaying relationship between mother and daughter.
Right.
And to me, it's a really emotional movie. The creature, I think, is really unique and different. It's a cross between almost like a demon dog with a little bit of Rawhead Rex with its teeth. And it is. I think it's just a really good film. And I think even if you don't want to revisit the film later, I think it's definitely worth a viewing. So, The Monster.
It sounds great. As you're telling about it, it's hitting these notes like I think I saw it,
Mhm.
but I'm not 100% sure. So, but all of the hits that you just talked about make sense to me. So I must have seen it at one point, and I don't know, maybe I was extra tired or something. I don't really remember seeing it. So, but I can guarantee you, I'll be checking it out.
Yeah,
Like,
it's an interesting part of his filmography thus far because he's directed 3 films: Strangers, Monster, and Dark and the Wicked. Now,
yeah,
this definitely is not as horrific as Strangers or Dark and the Wicked. It does work on more of a dramatic level, but again, I think that's what adds to its uniqueness. We don't see horror films that try to spend that much time on the relationship of characters.
right,
So that's why I think it's a good recommendation for our viewers and listeners to check out.
excellent. Well, Callie always is kind of like the middle child here, so I, I I would like to actually go to her next if she's ready.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's hear yours.
All right. I decided to go with one funny enough that Ricky just mentioned in his Rawhead Rex.
Perfect. Definitely a monster movie, no doubt about it.
It is. And the funny story behind that one is we used to sell a gray market uh, edition of that one. And that's how I saw it is we got the what was it, a laser disc or was it another VHS tape?
No, Laserdisc.
So that's why it looked really nice. So
Mhm.
we found this overseas laser disc or whatever he was able to find and transferred it. And our whole thing was I needed to be educated in the movies we were selling because if anybody had any questions or asked for recommendations, I should be able to at least do that much.
Right.
And even though I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the movies we sold, I still feel like this one caught me because it not only had a great cast as well as um, decent story. Like I was really intrigued by the story. The monster was really cool,
Yes.
and yeah, so that's my pick.
Well, I thought it was a really cool movie, but I think they were limited in that the face doesn't really move.
It
It
doesn't.
doesn't have a really articulate, monster head to it. Right. And I wish it did because I think that's the only thing that took me out of the movie is the fact that it doesn't change expressions.
It never closes its mouth.
Yeah, yeah. Which basically is the way I used to be when I was 336 pounds. I just never closed my mouth. But that's the only thing. That's the only thing that ever took me out of that movie. Other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And
Yep.
you're right. It is absolutely a monster movie.
Yeah,
So,
I keep hoping Clive Barker came around on that film because he was so angry about the way it turned out. Because if you read the story in Books of Blood, I mean, he jokingly referred to it as a giant penis, yeah. And you can't turn that into a memorable movie monster. So I'm kind of hoping that he came around on it.
yeah, I understand that. Um, you kind of it's kind of a bummer when the original writer has such disdain for a movie because it doesn't always translate to your vision of the movie. You're like, so in essence, are you saying, well, Clive Barker's wrong because I liked it? That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. I mean, between the 2 pre-Hellraiser movies that Barker was involved with, it's much better than Underworld, which was also called Transmutations, I think, quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of elements that are great. David Duke is really great in that film. The father from Date with an Angel
Yep.
is the only other movie that I can think of off the top of my head with him. The score has this great, literally monster movie, almost Godzilla-like theme. So there's a lot to love in that flick. I mean, Kino Lorber thought so. They came out with a steelbook. So you don't release a steelbook unless there's a good market for it.
That's for sure. My first choice happens to be in a steelbook. This is Pumpkinhead, and I have an interesting history with this movie because I'm friends with one of the co-writers, Gary Gerani, who I'm sure I've mentioned many times on these podcasts because he's just such a great guy, and we're absolutely hoping to get him as one of our guests. But so when I was doing the cards, the trading cards for Alf, and I believe in Living Color, he was working on various stages of Pumpkinhead with Mike Carducci, and there came a short period of time which I found quite comical, that every time I spoke with Gary about anything, he would be giving me yet another name that they wanted to name this movie because the studio did not like Pumpkinhead. I understand initially why, because it reminded the people at the studio of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the guy on the horseback with the literal pumpkin on his shoulders. And I think they were a little bit shocked by that they didn't really want to do that. But the titles that they were coming up with weren't all that great either. And it didn't make sense. One was called Vengeance. The other one was called Vengeance the Demon. I think there was a Vengeance of the Demon. I mean, it just changed so much. Yet when you sit back and watch the movie, Pumpkinhead is just perfect because it comes from a legend, an urban legend, and or in this case, a country legend. But it comes from that. It's it's spoken in whispers, and it's just such a damn good movie. So I never had a problem with the title. But what I will say is, this is a monster movie, 100%, but it also has so much in it. There's a first-time director, Stan Winston, who did a stellar job. It has atmosphere that you can cut with a knife. It has some really scary moments in it, but it also has some moments where your heart hurts for the characters in it. It's just I think, to be quite honest with you, it checks all the boxes that you need for a damn good monster movie. And I had the pleasure of for my son's 11th birthday party of bringing 11 children to see this movie.
What?
And I was a brand new father at the time. I adopted him when he was 10, but this was for his 11th birthday. So I hadn't even been a father for a year. And I sat down in the seat, completely surrounded by this mob of 11-year-olds. And it hit me, what if one of them has to go to the bathroom? What am I going to do? Am I going to take the one that needs to go to the bathroom and leave 10 behind unsupervised? And I thought, you idiot, you never thought of this? I certainly can't send an 11-year-old to the bathroom in this rundown movie theater, because it was a questionable movie theater. Send him to the bathroom alone too. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. Fortunately, nobody had to. So I looked out.
Hope and pray.
Yeah, but I came back and I said to my wife, we dodged a big bullet here. We got to do this in twos from now on. But it's a great movie. And if you have somehow stayed away from it because of the title, you are really missing something. So
I love
anyway.
Lance Henriksen in it. So
Oh my God, yes.
right.
Yeah. I mean, everything about the movie is just, honest to God, I think it hits all of the, or checks all of the boxes.
Yeah, and Stan Winston, I was hoping he would, at that point get hired for major projects after that. And aside from staying in the special effects industry, it just didn't happen.
With same thing with Savini. We've talked about it before. It's I don't know what happened, but something happened.
See, in Durrani and Carducci, it's the second time they attempted a monster movie, because they also did Neon Maniacs, which is a much lesser film, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But at least the idea of trying to create new monsters was being done by someone. They
Right.
weren't resurrecting the same old thing. They were trying to create new lore, new mythology. In Neon Maniacs, what is it, 12 different monster killer types?
Yep.
And and here they come up with Pumpkinhead, which seems like it should actually be a legend that people speak about. And Henriksen just so good in that movie. His buck teeth going on and everything, which was his insistence, as I understand it, because it was part of the things he needed to play that character.
Right.
And you're right, it's a perfect movie for a bunch of 10 and 11-year-old boys.
Oh,
and
it's
it's
wonderful.
the type of horror movie you can get away with showing them because there's no nudity. You don't have to worry about covering eyes or anything. It's just a great, I mean, even when it airs on television, I think there's very little they have to cut.
Right. And before I forget, it's Mark Carducci. I think I said Mike before. So if I did, you'll have to excuse me. I got a lot of stuff in my head.
And I know it's one other thing. It's something I know I bring up a lot lately, but it's very interesting how you have a level of class warfare even in that movie to a degree.
Yes.
You have a bunch of rich, well-off kids who come into town to go ahead and do their thing, and they destroy this poor man, basically a poor mountain man's life, and they're just like, oh well, we're just going to move on, we're just going to do this and we're going to cover it up, even to know some of them are against the idea of covering it up. So that's an interesting dynamic that's in quite a few horror films even back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
My next one is 2019's After Midnight. Now, this is directed and co-written by Jeremy Gardner of The Battery, which we spoke about a few episodes ago.
Yes.
And very much like The Battery and The Monster, it falls into the very unique format of being more than simply a straight horror film. After Midnight is the story of a couple, Hank and Abby. They've been together for 10 years. And Hank's perfectly fine with their lifestyle. You get the idea they live in a small town, small little redneck town. Probably it's the town he grew up in. And he's thinking everything's fine with their relationship. Abby, however, ups and leaves one day. He wakes up and she's gone. And he doesn't understand why. He doesn't understand what's going on exactly. And we learn through a series of flashbacks that her life has been changing. She wants more out of life, not away from him. She wants to do more with him. She wants to travel. She just wants to do more than end up having kids and be in that same town. So that should be Hank's biggest problem, but it's not. Hank's biggest problem is at night, a monster is attacking his house. And he goes through a whole series of events trying to catch this thing, between bear traps. He starts shooting at it. And in the meantime, you meet Hank's friends in town throughout this entire juncture of the movie, including a character, his best friend and town sheriff, played by Justin Benson of Benson and Moorhead, the directing team behind The Spring and Resolution. And he's actually a pretty decent actor. Yeah. And he keeps trying to figure out how he's going to catch this monster. And again, at the same time, dealing with Abby and Abby not being home. And it's a really funny, very much like The Battery, very clever dialogue. And it's just a cute, funny and many times very sad sort of movie about this guy who he really does love this woman. He just can't pull himself out of his own self-absorption of this is my life. This is what we do. We live in this town. What's wrong with that kind of a thing?
Right.
And I know that the third act kind of does work for some people I've talked to. Others it doesn't. It's definitely not superior to The Battery in any way in terms of Gardner's work. But I think just for his acting alone, and Brea Grant, who plays Abby, who's just phenomenal. She's an actress she's directing now, actually, which could be a reason she doesn't pop up in a lot currently. But she's just, I think Rich said it best. They're so good together in this movie, you wouldn't be surprised if you found out they were actually a couple. You get that same energy as the Amazing Spider-Man between Andrew Garfield and help me with the name.
Emma.
Emma Stone. You get that sort of energy between them, and
Right.
you really want them to get together by the time you get to the end of the movie.
Absolutely.
The creature, very much like the monster, is extremely unique. I've never seen a monster that looks like this before. Kind of this
Right.
weird land roving porcupine sort of just bizarre creature.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, I think you would enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think it's great.
That is a great choice. Great monster.
Yep.
Oh, is it my turn? Am I up?
It's you.
Falls in your court.
All right. My second choice is going to be one of my favorites, Tremors.
Yeah.
The original. There's just something so fun and so quirky about this little movie that could, like, everybody was on board. You have Kevin Bacon, who is fantastic, anyway.
Yep.
And then you have Fred Ward, and everything that he does is also amazing. And the two of them together, the chemistry between them is just phenomenal.
Right.
The basic synopsis for this movie is these two buddies, they live out in a very isolated part of the United States. When the two friends decide, okay, today's the day, you know what, we're leaving perfection, we're going, they get stopped.
Who would have thunk?
Yeah, who would have thunk? Not because of anything that they're doing. They literally get stopped by monsters, big ass monsters. This movie just has great practical effects. There was no CGI, nothing that was done computer wise. So you have a really good feeling about it. The actors work off of that incredibly well.
Right.
And so again, you just have this really fun monster movie, the townsfolk coming together to see how they can solve this problem.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a bad performance in the movie. I was dragged to this movie by my son because he got free tickets to see him.
Oh,
And
nice.
Wait, why did you have to get dragged to a movie where you had free tickets?
Here we go. If you remember the trailer for Tremors, the first trailer, it had all of those things coming out at the screen like this, and they looked like snakes. And I thought, that's what this movie is. Tremors is chock full of snakes, and I'm not going to enjoy this. And come to find out that, yeah, there is nary a snake in the damn thing. So anyway, chalk it up to Rich was wrong again. But we went to the movie, and he and I had an absolute blast. And it meant the world to me to be able to go see that with him. So it's become one of my favorites. So much so, this is all 7 movies. I'm that into it that I can sit through, because there's some bad ones here. I can sit through those movies just because it's Tremors. And yes, the first one is genius and the last one is far from it, but I'm telling you, I just enjoy the ride with these. I I highly recommend this movie to anybody who thinks that they would like to have a fun time at the theater or during a movie. This is the one. It really is. So I'm going to put this here. Thank goodness I brought a second one, Callie.
Yeah. The first time I saw Tremors actually was because of Bob Clark, and not good Bob Clark. My friends and
Okay,
I had went to see Loose Cannons. Do you remember that movie?
I do
Dan
not.
Aykroyd,
Yeah,
Gene Hackman.
right.
And Gene Hackman is a tough cop, and he's paired with a cop who's insane pretty much to solve a crime. I saw that Bob Clark wrote and directed it, so I'm like, hey, this is going to be great. 20 minutes into this movie, we're like, this is dreadful. This is horrible. So, us being teenagers, we snuck out because we knew Tremors was playing within 30 minutes of that one starting. So, we went in, caught the trailers, and got to watch Tremors. And I was so happy that we did that, because
Yeah,
if I had went to see the rest of Loose Cannons and not seen Tremors opening weekend, I would have never been able to forgive myself.
yeah,
But Tremors is just, like you said, every performance is great. Michael Gross and Reba McEntire,
right.
they may be my favorite part of the movie, even over Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, because they work off each other. They have the same dynamic as Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, really.
Yes,
They work off each other so tremendously well. You didn't get penetration even with the elephant gun. It's
right.
so great. And it's kind of funny how they have to feed on that in the sequels because she's not around. So they actually write it into the character, for Bert.
Yeah,
He's heartbroken without her around, but they're able to make Bert an interesting character still, even in
right.
the sequels and prequel, which that prequel is dreadful. That prequel, I should have loved that because I love Westerns. So I'm like, oh,
Right.
okay. A Tremors movie in the Old West. This should be great, but it's not a good movie.
Yeah,
You've got to rewatch it.
that was tough to go through, but again, there's something that makes me sit there and watch it, and it's certainly not that I'm tied down to the couch. It's just one of those things where, it deserves at least something because it's Tremors.
From the writers of City Slickers.
Yes.
I always thought that was funny.
It's now my turn, so I wonder if I'm going to steal off anybody else. No, I know I'm not on this one. I have a connection to the original Universal monsters, and that's because I was when Creature Walks Among Us came out. I was 3 days old, so at least I was able to fit in to the Universal Monster classics by being alive while they were still going on. Of course, 3 days later they did the last one, and that was it. But at least I got in there on that level. I absolutely, as a monster movie, I absolutely love all three Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, and it's tough for me to separate them in the sense that each of them have a very unique story to tell. So I would recommend any of them, but most importantly, I'd recommend all of them. I think these are some dynamite things, and I think it's also among the best monster suits ever built.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just iconic, and when people mess with it, you can tell automatically when somebody's doing it kind of sort of to get past the copyright on it or the trademark on it. It's like, yeah, no, that's not it. It's just not even close. So anyway, those are.
So now
those
you
are
love all
important.
three of them. Is Among Us your favorite, even compared to the original?
No,
Because Among Us is number 3, right?
right. But it allowed me to be born into the
Right.
the
That's
classic
cool. Magic number,
Universal.
3 and 3. You were 3 years old, and it was the third in the series.
Yep. But no, I think the first one is my favorite, but it's for a real guy reason, which is that Julie Adams just looks amazing in that white bathing suit. I mean,
Oh my goodness,
she
yes.
really does. Yet another woman who when I was a certain age, I realized, geez, she's not as icky as all other girls. Then about 6 months later, I found out why I was changing. So,
Creature was the first VHS I ever bought.
oh,
I remember,
really?
yeah, bought it at Montgomery Awards for like $5.88, some stupid price like
So
that.
you got the Good Times one.
Yes, I love the
Okay.
cover they used for that too, because it
Yeah,
was
I did
I think it was
too.
the actual one sheet, I think,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But I
And I
remember
think,
watching that movie, right? And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of weird. Here I am 15 years old and I'm crushing on this chick that's like probably old enough to be my grandmother at this point in time.
yeah. Well, when I met her, I was completely tongue-tied. I just, she had written a book, and I was lucky enough to meet her, and I was thrilled to meet her. But you also don't want to come off on as being too lecherous. So I was like, I said, so I basically said, I had the biggest crush on you in that movie, and then that was it. I just dropped it after that. But
When you liked somebody or found them attractive when they were captured on film, that's
yeah.
understandable.
Mhm.
So try not to think about how they might look now.
No, but I will tell you, she always looked like her. She never she looked like an older version of her, absolutely, but she looked like her. You could tell in the eyes that
Oh,
that's her. And I was lucky enough to spend a fair amount of last weekend with Pauline Pert, Martina Beswick, and it's the same thing with them. Yes, they've aged, but no doubt about it, that's them, and they're spectacular. We actually became buddy with each other, so I'm thrilled to death
That's
to
cool.
be able to call them both legitimate friends now instead of just people I look up to. Yeah, there are certain actresses who just don't look like the person that they used to be, but that's the same with all people, you know. And yet Julie Adams, especially in the eyes, absolutely. I looked at her the first time and it was like, yep, that's no doubt about it. That's her.
Kind of like
So,
when I saw Pam Grier at a show and I'm like, that's
oh
still Pam Grier.
yeah, she's
Rich is, oh yeah.
I
But
believe
going back to Creature, there is a bit of news that I had forgotten about. How do you feel about the remake that was just announced to be officially happening after all these years?
mixed emotions because I very much disliked the Wolfman that came out. It's
Mm.
probably 10, 15 years ago now. And yet I went on the Classic Horror Film Board, and to a one, everybody absolutely loved it. And I thought, did they see the same movie that I did? And what I finally came away with is that they had romanticized it so much, and that they wanted it to be good, and that's why it became good to them. I thought the flaws were just remarkable, how bad they were, including they get Rick Baker to do the makeup effects and then digitize it afterwards.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, I don't understand. And my understanding is he was pretty pissed, and he had every right to be.
right?
um it's just one of those things. So I'm assuming that I'm going to get the same thing with this, that when it's all over with, I'm going to be like, yeah, that had a lot of misfires, and then I'm going to go to the CHFB and they're going to be greatest movie ever made, it's stunning, so
Yeah,
I
and
have.
James Wan, I don't know if he's the best director for that project.
Yeah, and we won't find that out until it's too late,
Yeah, yeah,
unfortunately.
I think it's a situation where they've been trying to get it off the ground. I mean, John Carpenter at one point was going to do a remake,
Yep.
and then they basically gave him Village of the Damned instead.
Right.
And it's been just sitting, just in the lagoon all these years, and suddenly and they announce it with Juan attached. And I don't know if it's more of a director for hire gig. Maybe they're just like, hey, he's a well-known horror director, we'll give it to him. but it'll be interesting to see, I guess, what they do with it. I mean, the design is going to be the biggest point of contention,
Right.
because if you take it too far off from what we're used to, you're not going to have anyone who goes to see it. I mean,
Right.
it's one of the issues with studios right now. Who are you making the movie for? And if you keep trying to cater to a market that doesn't know what the Creature from the Black Lagoon is, or even care what it is, by changing it, you eliminate the audience who is going to see it.
Exactly.
So,
And I almost wish it's the same design.
yeah, they
I
could just
really
go
do.
back and do the same design and it would look phenomenal.
I'd be on that, I'd be all for that. And you'd never hear me bitch about the fact that, oh, well, they stole it from, no, I want it to be the original design because it's perfection. It really is. And it only takes other movies like it, where there's a person in a suit the entirety of the movie. It only takes watching one of those to realize how good Creature from the Black Lagoon is. The design of the creature it's just brilliant.
So
And
I have
hopefully they'll stay away
oh,
from CGI. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I had a question. Shape of Water, was that CGI or was that like a mix of both?
It was both. It was both.
Okay.
It was a lot of Doug Jones, and there was also some computer work.
And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I believe that's why Guillermo made that movie, was because Universal would not give him access to Creature. Like, he wanted
Right.
to do a remake of that, and they had no interest in it. And yeah, he's like, "Fuck you, cocksucker! I go make my own movie." And he goes off and does a movie that wins an Oscar. So
I'm sorry, was that your Guillermo impression?
that was my best one. Yeah.
My God, that was just dead on. I actually saw him in front of me saying that when you just did that.
So
That's all right. I couldn't do him either, so that's okay.
No, he would be a great great guest. He would be great.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Would I have
And
to bleep out a lot?
hopefully they'll put a guy in a suit, though. That's one of the things I can say about Alien Romulus. They were insistent that they weren't going to have a xenomorph that was CGI based.
Good.
No, there's actual guys in suits, and you feel it, and you can tell that's what it is.
What a pioneering idea to do what works.
And to save money, incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I've never understood that. It's like the Thing prequel. They went back and CGI'd everything, even to know they had shot the entire film with practical effects.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't figure it either.
Alrighty, who's up to bat?
You are.
Okay. I have Of Unknown Origin. This is
Oh,
directed by George P. Cosmatos, who I think is such an underrated director. Like, people never remember him. He directed Leviathan. He directed Rambo: First Blood Part 2. He did Cobra, one of my personal favorites. Just a really visionary guy. And apparently it's in the genes because his son directed Mandy and The Black Rainbow.
yep.
This is really cool. It's a Canadian film. And
Canadian.
Peter Weller is a businessman. Get the idea. He works on Wall Street, has a beautiful wife and kid. Life's going grand in his New York apartment until he gets a rodent that breaks into the house. Starts out with little things, cereal boxes eaten in, things of that nature. And it becomes an obsession. It's like he goes, "This fucking thing is in my house. You don't come into my house that I paid this money for." He's really like the pinnacle example of a yuppie of the time. So this rat coming in and just disturbing his home is unacceptable. At one point, his wife and kid decide they're going to go visit her father, and he should be just working and coming home every night. But no, he turns into such an obsessed individual. He goes to war with this rat, and he
Mhm.
becomes so obsessed with it. One of my favorite parts of the movie, when he's at his peak of, okay, I'm going to kill this thing, and I've been researching rats. He's at a dinner party with the other executives, and just out of the blue, he starts explaining to people how rats work, how they came to America, what a rat can do, how it can break down its body, how it can eat, more than its weight. And it's just everyone thinks, what are you talking about? And he
Right.
just becomes so crazy obsessed. And I can see they probably made it on the strength of, well, it's kind of like an alien movie. We're going to do that, but it stands on its own. And Weller, who I've always liked as an actor anyways, he's just so good. He's so freaking insane. And it's just a wonderful flick. And if you get the Scream Factory version of it, there's commentary by the director, which is nice. And it was written by Brian Taggart, who helped to create the V miniseries. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit.
Absolutely.
And Shannon Tweed plays his wife. So if anything else, that's another reason to watch the movie.
I completely agree. It's a great little movie, and one that I didn't rush out to see, but after I saw it, I realized that it's kind of brilliant. I mean, it's simple on paper, but what everybody brings to it just elevates it so much.
See, and I think that was his greatest gift as a filmmaker. He's not around any longer, but Cosmatos was able to take ideas, which, like you said, on paper are just it's pedestrian. I mean, even Leviathan. Leviathan was a movie that came out in the summer of underwater monster movies, but Leviathan, out of all of them, is probably the most interesting in the way. And once again, Peter Weller, part of the cast, he did the same thing with Cobra. Cobra, is essentially a cop movie, but he turns it into kind of shady horror. But it's one of the unique things of him as a filmmaker is he's able to take these ideas, which seem generally routine or one straightforward genre, and he's able to do a lot with it.
My last choice for this one is going to be The Host.
Excellent choice.
Yay! I like
mine, but okay.
my Asian horror movies.
Yeah.
I have kind of a love-hate relationship with them, but this one is definitely a favorite, simply because the acting in it and the monster itself. Although it's CG, it's really well done. You don't really get to see it full on, especially not in the beginning. It's so quick moving, going behind buildings and jumping over cars. So you're like, oh my God, it's freaking huge. The characters have such great charisma with one another and what they're going through individually. It's just a great horror or monster movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. I understand what you mean about love-hate relationship with Asian movies, because there are, at least in my experience, there will be this really rock solid monster movie, but then they have to almost insert ghosts in it somehow, and it's like, but you didn't have to do that. But the culture says, it would be much better if you put ghosts in it. And
there's dead people. Yeah.
So I look at it as you didn't need it. They look at it as, no, that's the driving force behind it. So I understand. I can't get into that mindset always, but when I can move past that, and believe me, I can, for good movies, I'll just look past it. Man, there's some rock solid stuff in there, and The Host happens to be one of them. It's remarkably good, and again, something that I certainly recommend.
Bong Joon-ho, who directed it, eventually winning an Oscar for Parasite. What he does so great is what you described, baby, which is when you first see the creature, it is done totally opposite of what you would do in an American or traditional horror film. You just see it in the distance and you're just like, what the hell is that? And then you see it swooping people up and you're like, oh my God. And it's just such a remarkable opening scene for that creature.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that the characters, you really love the characters because they're a family with issues, and unlike the monster, they don't hate each other. They're not having that type of relationship. They're just, the son's not really doing what he could have in his life, and just the entire family is in this weird state of flux, but they still love each other and they're still together, and they really are the backbone of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I
And
I agree.
I won't say exactly what happens in the ending of the movie, but the finale of the picture, when I say that, I mean the final frames are so against the grain of a traditional horror movie,
Yes.
because you're waiting for and you don't get that, but you get something even better. And when you see it, you'll see what I mean. The inspiration for it was that Junho had read in the paper about a controversy where an American company was dumping formaldehyde into the public water system. And somehow that company was able to get out of any responsibility just by paying, a few $1 million to the Korean government.
Right.
And that's what fueled his idea for the movie. And he injects that into the film itself. You still have an idea of, people who are poor are always going to end up down here, why the rich responsible for all the trouble and all the problems happening in the film. And I think that's just an interesting theme that he's been able to use. And again, in Parasite, same concept. Parasite operates almost as a shady horror film to a degree. It's almost
Yeah.
like Bad Ronald, except you've got a family of Bad Ronalds in some respects.
And my third one is, I jokingly call Alien 0.0. It's It the Monster, It the Terror from Beyond Space.
Yay!
And I bring this up not to slam Alien. I freaking love Alien. I don't think they can make a bad one, although I understand it's had its high points and low points. But I love Alien. That said, this movie is very much along the same lines, plot wise, but it's a great suit. It's an inexpensive suit. It was considered done on the cheap, but there's just something about it that I absolutely love, and it became one of my favorite monsters. But yes, it's a stowaway on a spacecraft, and not the kind of stowaway you want. And the inhabitants of the spacecraft meet pretty terrible ends. So it really is along the same lines. But that movie, when it's on TV, you're watching a good old fashioned monster movie. And I absolutely love it. And I believe Ray Crash Corrigan is in the monster suit, and he was an old time actor. I have no idea how old he was at the time, but my guess is that he was of the age where it's not too easy to be in a full suit, and he still does a great job. So I am curious to whether either of you have seen it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. In hot take, I think it's a better constructed film than the original Thing from Another World, to be honest.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
with you on that.
A
Although
lot
I
of the
never
scare
thought of it.
sequences are really well done.
Yep.
In fact, one is very reminiscent of what Scott did in Alien when Dallas dies, and the alien does that kind of hug me kind of thing.
Right.
The creature in it does sort of the same, kind of I'm gonna hug you, but I'm gonna kill
Right.
you sort of motion. And yeah, I always thought it was just a really fun, interesting film. I didn't see it until I read an interview with Dan O'Bannon, and he mentioned that film.
Right.
So,
Do
but
we
yeah,
have that one?
no, unfortunately, I don't. But I'm pretty sure it's streaming somewhere. I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I would guess so. If you can't find it, let me know. I'll make it. No, I'm not even going to say that. Never mind.
You can't say that on screen. No. Yeah. But it's interesting because Edward Kahn, the director, also did Invasion of the Saucermen,
Yeah.
another great alien invasion flick. It's actually going to be a trifecta. It's going to be 3 for 1, and it's Larry Cohen's It's Alive trilogy. The first 2 are the strongest films. I can't really recommend the third one highly, but you need to see it if you're going to see the first 2. The original It's Alive I saw on CBS late night TV. It was one of those. My mom had fallen asleep on the couch. Night Stalker was over, and they showed It's Alive. And I'm just like, what is this movie? Because the Bernard Herrmann score catches you immediately.
Right.
It's this wonderful, just it's just so great. You're like, oh my God, this theme is amazing. And it's a very kind of mainstream open. It's a husband and wife. They're waking up in the middle of the night because it's time for her to have their new baby. And, it's this great thing that I was never able to instill in myself with all my children that were born. I was always panicked. I was never able to be as calm as John Ryan is when he wakes up. He's woken by his wife to say it's time to go to the hospital. And it kind of plays out like, okay, we're going to drop our oldest son off at my buddy's house because back in the day, you didn't bring your kid with you to that type of thing. And he's spending his time in the waiting room like most men of the 60s and 70s instead of being in the actual delivery room.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he notices a surgeon, a doctor in scrubs stumble out bloody.
Yeah.
And he collapses and he's just like, what is going on? And he runs in. And what he discovers is that his baby apparently has ripped itself away from his mother, killed multiple people in the room, and is now escaped.
Yep.
And what you learn through the film is that apparently a drug was used on women throughout the decade that has created this abnormal birth. And it really deals, and this is what Larry Cohen, the writer and director, was always able to do so brilliantly. He could take the most silly, absurd idea. Like I could see him pitching. I got this movie. It's about a giant dragon creature serpent that's killing people in New York. And they'd be like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But then you watch the movie and it's interspliced with a detective trying to solve a crime and Michael Moriarty, who's helped to rob a jewelry store. And the same thing happens in It's Alive. You really deal with the relationship between the husband and wife. The wife is falling apart, kind of blames the husband a little bit. They're having to deal with the media outside who want to talk about the monster baby that is apparently running throughout Los Angeles. And the creature is great. It's this giant abnormal head baby. It's just the greatest creature. It's so wonderful. Created by Rick Baker, a very young Rick Baker.
Very young.
It's a tight running time. It's only like an 80-minute movie, which is sort of insane. And I remember watching it. I'm like, this movie is great. And I'm telling my mom about it. And she said, oh, yeah, I've seen that before. She said, there's another one. I'm like, there's another movie? There's another It's Alive? So we went to the video store and got It Lives Again, which was on this great. Do you remember the Warner Brothers VHS big box? It's great because it's a birthday cake. It says happy birthday. And you see the monster has clawed through it with a little bit of blood. It's so great. Wonderful cover. And the sequel, it's like Aliens. Basically, the husband has now decided he's going to help other people who are having the same situation.
Oh.
And they're just really fun movies.
Yes,
and
they
it's
are.
some of Cohen's best work, best writing, best directing. You get to part 3, you're not going to want to revisit it much compared to the first 2. I think I've definitely seen 3 the least, which is a shame because you have Michael Moriarty, you have Karen Black in it. But the idea of these babies grown may seem like a good idea on paper, but the effect is horrible.
Yeah.
It's like a grown man wanted to do a cosplay suit of the baby from It's Alive, and he was like, "Hey, I'm at the convention. Here I am," and it's pretty bad.
The third one's Island of the Alive.
Island of the Alive, which is a great title because it does kind of call back to like 1950s monster movies and stuff.
Right.
But the movie itself, I think there just wasn't a lot of money there, and people were like, "What's a baby like this going to look like when it's grown?" And it's pretty rough. But those first 2 movies are really solid. There was a horrible remake. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
It happened in the midst of mass remakes happening, done by an independent studio, and it's just it tried to turn it into the thing where we're going to do everything from the mother's point of view, which I'm not saying is a negative thing. But it just turned into more more social ills, really.
Right.
As I mean, I could see that they were trying to do what Cohen would do, but Cohen only had that ability, it seems, to somehow take present situations and use them, not even as social commentary necessarily, because his stuff was really just right on the surface. It was never down here. He
Yeah.
never did the Romero thing. He's just like, nope, the stuff. I'm talking to you about commercialism, and it the entire time. There's no, oh, you know what? I was thinking about the stuff. It's kind of like corporations being so. No, it's there immediately from the beginning of the movie.
Right.
And he's able to do that in those first two movies, and the remake just couldn't really get it right. So, but I would avoid the remake. But those first two movies are just extremely solid.
They really are. And again, ludicrous premise, but still, once you get past that, once you say, all right, look, I'm in for the ride, that's fine. They really are solid and very much Cohen-esque. That's the one great thing about his movies is that, they're his movies. You can tell.
There was never a movie that was taken from that man, because he made sure the financing was all through him.
Yeah.
Even the movies that see, and this is what I loved about him. And if I could really structure my career as a filmmaker, I would want to do it like him, which is you make your movies, which you secure your own financing, and there's no denying that's your movie. And then you write something that a big studio pays for, and you use that to pay for your movies.
Right.
But if you look at Phone Booth, it's still a Cohen idea.
Yes.
I could see him going, it's like, what if you were trapped in a phone booth and you couldn't get out, and if you tried to leave, you would get shot at? What would that be like? And it's interesting to see what that's like on a big budget with an established filmmaker like Joel Schumacher and Colin Farrell. It still plays out like a Cohen movie.
Yeah, it really does.
Like he could have done that on his own, shot in Los Angeles on a low budget with Tim Thomerson, and it would still be a good movie. In fact,
Right.
I want to see that movie now. I want to travel back in time. I want to make sure the original Phone Booth never happens, and I want Cohen to direct it.
Well, if you ever decide to structure your career like Cohen's, I would say that make sure you have bail money, because you're not going to get away with the kind of guerrilla shooting that he did. Because
I could not.
he was
Was it Black
fearless.
Caesar? Which one was it with Fred Williamson, where Fred Williamson was bleeding out and he stumbled through 42nd Street in the Bronx and everything, bleeding out, with a camera following him,
Right.
and no one called the police or anything.
Nope.
But what's great is when you watch that scene, you can see people just like, it's like genuine, like, oh my God, that guy's, oh my God.
Yep.
Is he okay?
I'm telling you, I don't think he ever got caught.
No.
I mean, which is remarkable, because if you and I did it, we'd be in jail in 3 seconds.
Yep.
We
Yep.
wouldn't even, the camera wouldn't even be warmed up.
And such a prolific guy, man. He just wrote his ass off. He wrote so many he was writing all the way up until the point that he died.
Yeah.
Which is incredible and a testament to him as a creative entity, I think.
And
the fact that that's what he was. He was a writer, and he was a filmmaker, and he was going to keep making things as long as he could.
And as fans, we are that much poorer for him having passed away, because he was just phenomenal.
I only got to see one Larry Cohen movie in the theater, and that was Original Gangsters, which is still a great movie. I still loved it, because you got Fred Williamson, you got Pam Grier, and it was such a fun movie. And it was cool because I'm watching this low budget action movie, on the big screen.
Yeah. No, I was fortunate. I got to see Q. I got to see in the theater. I got to see It's Alive and its sequel, and I'd say maybe 2 or 3 others. And it was phenomenal. But it was one of those deals where you knew that you were in for something special.
He never let me down with any of his movies, that's for sure. Even ones that I'm like, that was kind of odd. Like God Told Me To.
Right.
I haven't revisited it a lot, but it's a good movie. It's a movie that you're not expecting by the time you get to the end.
Yep.
And he was the king of that. He was the king of being able to say, well, this is how it's going to start, and you're going to have no idea how it ends.
Right.
And you will not be able to guess it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode of 50 Shades of Monster. Any last words, Rich?
Yeah, in a way. I just want to mention that there are a lot of definitions for monsters, and we plan on covering them all. So thank you and goodbye.
See you
Thanks,
later,
Rich.
El Capitan.
And what about you, baby? Any last words?
I want to close with, I was really thinking about monster movies, and the biggest monster is the monster in all of us that just
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Bye.